Every day in America, approximately 22 veterans, first responders, or crime victims commit suicide. That number is a staggering amount and constantly increasing. Get involved in offering solutions to the men and women who so bravely take an oath to protect and serve the lives of Americans. Now, a word from our sponsors and then our host.
Welcome to Crisis in America, PTSD and Veteran Suicide. I am Eugene Flynn, and I'm here today with my co-host, Colonel Mike Brown. I want to bring the audience back to the purpose of this show. With the return of over 2.7 million veterans from Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan, and other recent, oftentimes multiple war zone deployments, America's solemn responsibility to care for our returning heroes is a more important mission than ever. We all know the often cited statistics: 22 suicides a day, one every 65 minutes, over 66,000 dead, and in this year, the death toll will exceed 70,000. Regrettably, the suicide crisis that has endured and markedly increased in our veteran community over the past decade stands as a stark reminder that we must redouble our efforts to address continued gaps in veterans' care. Crisis in America PTSD and Veteran Suicides podcast series purpose is to bring back suicide awareness, education, understanding, and the needed changes and solutions on this epidemic plaguing our nation. Yet the number of veterans and service members lost to suicide exceeds the numbers of deaths occurred during the Vietnam War. This is a national security problem. We can and must do more to address this problem. And that is why Colonel Mike and I are here today to talk about this problem. Of the more than 2 million military service members that have served in the Iraq or Afghanistan war theaters since 2001, there are few in our nation who have an accurate perspective on the human costs and consequences of modern war, but whose voices are mostly silent. The construct of PTSD and moral injury reflects the fact that service members may be called upon in the course of their duties to inflict immense devastation, powerful weapons, resulting in injury and death within the close confines of civilian cities and villages. For many of those veterans, though fear of dying was an element of trauma, burden of exposure to violence and inflicting harm is even more consequential. PTSD and moral injury is a construct that identifies the morally injurious consequences, wounds of war and wartime trauma. Experiences such as perpetuating violence, being required to kill someone or to witness killing, or lacking the ability or means to help those in need can transgress one's deeply held moral, spiritual, and religious beliefs, or culture-based organizational and group-based rules about fairness and the value of life. Thus, service members may experience themselves as being morally wounded or experience moral injury as a result of their exposure to and the involvement in traumatic experiences. There is increasing recognition of the importance of identifying and perhaps incorporating into psychological services the spiritual and religious beliefs and practices of patients. It has been suggested that culturally competent care should address such practices and beliefs in order to recognize when a patient is in the need of a spiritually integrated or even spiritually directed psychotherapy. Today we are going to talk about the release of the President's roadmap to empower veterans and end a national tragedy of suicide. We're talking about prevention, an historic nationwide plan to raise awareness about mental health, connect veterans and others at risk of suicide to federal and local resources, and facilitate focused and coordinated research into suicide. It is an old idea that frankly is not the solution we are looking for in America. In fact, the hard truth, it's just another campaign promise that paints another broad picture solution when we need fine print. We talked before about large government campaigns that only talk about awareness in the past shows, and they don't work. They only appease the issue. They don't solve the issue. Colonel Mike, can you take over and explain this roadmap? Then we can stop at certain points to articulate our concerns.
Sean, it's great to be here again with you today on the air. And you're right. I'm so disappointed. Another campaign, more wasted resources, frankly, that have failed in the past And frankly, they will fail in the future. And why? Because they don't address the needs of the veterans. They do not focus on the local involvement. They will have it in their campaign, but their words have lacked action in the past. And I've read through this campaign. And if you can be tedious and you can be thoughtful and objective as you read through the campaign, all I have seen is big picture ideas that have not worked in the past, and they lack action. You know, Sean, the increase in the number of veterans who die by suicide represents another setback again. I'm an advocate for change. You're an advocate for change. We want it. And I think our last 8 shows have shown that our interests are solutions. This is not a solution. It's dusted off old ideas that are not working. But we'll get into that. We'll get into that deep, America. And we'll get into some solutions of what we believe should be in this strategy if the national level needs to be involved, and where they need to be involved, and how they can help. Writing 150 goals and a gazillion objectives and throwing it on the president's desk for signature and saying this is the new roadmap, well, we're going to get into that. Because you know what? PTSD and moral injury breaks the spirit of a veteran. I'm telling you what, this campaign broke my spirit. Moral injury and PTSD, it makes people question that their ability to do the right thing, and it leaves them more contaminated with the feeling that they have no purpose or meaning. Do you hear that, America? Do you hear that, those that put these big campaigns together and the strategy? Do you think those that are suffering with PTSD and moral injury are going to read through your 150 goals and your gazillion objectives? Do you think the local communities in a county in western Ohio, in a small community called Peebles, Ohio, is going to pull this campaign out and develop a solution? No. Veteran suicide is a tragedy in this country. We started measuring it back in the decades following the Civil War, but one that sadly went unaddressed for generations. Today, leaders in the communities need to take action. Do you hear what I just said? Leaders in the communities, not these national campaigns and these broad areas of government agencies. And it's not that your hearts are not in the right place. You're just out of touch. You're set wrong. When are you going to learn? Between 2008 and 2012, you spent over $1 billion. Go back to our show. We did an analysis on it. We showed you where you went wrong. And here you go again. Today, leaders in the communities need to take action and steps to ensure that the men and women who bravely fought for us when they were called on, I will give them the care and the attention. This is where it happens. Community level. They need, during some of their darkest hours, is when I would turn to my community. It is not up to the federal government to set these actions and steps into place. It is the community leaders who need to own it, and the community leaders who need the national resources. The national resources, President Trump. Big government campaigns are a distractor. Please let the governors run their states and let the community set the tone and the need. We don't need thousands of pages of documents of how to reduce suicides. It's not that complicated. Quit making it complicated. This roadmap is going to drive us into a ditch and perpetuate this epidemic. Not sure what you were thinking. An old idea greased up again with no teeth. You know, Edison had a point in his life where he's talked about insanity. You keep on doing the things over and over again, expecting different results. That was his definition of insanity. Hey, Sean, let's read through some of this campaign, and then we can discuss it along the way. It has basically has 3 deliverables attached to it. We're not going to talk about all 3 because we just don't have time to. But maybe we'll dedicate some more of the show to it depends on the comments that we get some feedback from. We're going to talk about the President's Roadmap to Empower Veterans and End the National Tragedy of Suicide. That's one deliverable. Get this next deliverable. A legislative proposal consisting of recommendations for grants. Can you imagine this? This is a proposal for a recommendation. You know what strategic resourcing is without resourcing? Nothing but rhetoric, but that's their deliverable, rhetoric. Their third is a national research strategy. We've already talked about strategies on this show for research. We've already talked about the numerous studies that they've spent for the last 2012 to 2020. Sean, you and I have talked about them. We already know the medical community and the spiritual community have thousands and thousands of research already conducted and know where the breaks and the breaking points are at. And they know that they need to come together to talk about a more emerged approach for therapy. Well, these are the three deliverables in this campaign. We're going to talk about the first. National Suicide Prevention Activation Campaign. Here's their goal. The primary goal of the campaign is to change the culture surrounding issues related to suicide and mental health. Let me stop right there. This is their goal. Now, I don't know where you come from. Where I come from, you have to measure a goal. How the heck are you going to measure that? You're going to measure a cultural change? This is their top goal. The primary goal is to change the culture. Their end state, we want to create awareness about the risk and protection factors and encourage people to reach out to those who may be struggling. I think we're already doing that through our shows, through the nonprofits. Why are we duplicating efforts? Now, I think the next one is, and I'm going to be objective here, is the means. Now, this part is, I don't think it has to be part of a campaign strategy. I think this has to be a part of government in general, putting media in place to speak about the awareness. And the campaign will try to rely on the coordinated messages using national, digital, radio, and television public service announcements. Yeah, I agree with this. About time. But why do you have to conclude this into a campaign strategy and spend multiple resources? This is a national epidemic. We own it. America, we own it. You don't have to be directed CBS, NBC, ABC, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. You should be doing this on your own. How much is a 30-second ad going to cost? You're going to place that on the taxpayer of America for a national epidemic? I don't think so. Efforts will also focus on dissemination in states with the highest concentration of veterans. What the hell does that mean? Efforts are going to focus on the dissemination in states with a high concentration of veterans? What about the states that don't have high concentration? You're going to leave them out? I'm getting frustrated. It will only rely on high-profile ambassadors to help amplify this message? High-profile ambassadors? I tell you what, this is about the have and have-nots again. This is about big government being out of touch. Our favorite sponsor, one of our sponsors out there, or one of our endorsers, I won't say sponsors, but Wounded Warrior Program is doing this already. Again. Sean, what are your thoughts about this before we go any deeper?
Colonel Mike, thank you. Again, the term that comes to mind here. So this is part of our assignment. We get to talk, right? But you and I both know one thing is that this is the lowest form of service in Colonel Mike's mind and in my mind. We're not here to talk. We're doing it because it has to be done. So today is a form of action from Colonel Mike Brown and Sean Flynn. What I'm hearing in what you're saying, Colonel Mike, is let's start putting people to work. Let's get to work. What I'm hearing, Colonel Mike, is put us to work. Put us to work. We're ready to start moving, and we're ready to start working. And if that means giving us a call to come down and to do a proposal and to communicate, that's fine. But the truth is that I'm a little bit impatient right now because I understand that what you just explained is all, like you said, it's flappage. It's just lip service, and right now, let me check myself. Yeah, I used to be attached to government agencies. I grew up in a government family, and I understand there's this thing, it's called sustained mediocrity, and we can get comfortable. Well, today, Colonel Mike and I, we're not here to flap our lips to hear ourselves talk, and we're not about just that. We're not about being comfortable. We're not about sustained mediocrity. And I'm grateful to be on this show with you, Colonel Mike, because I'm looking forward to hearing you talk about the action, not only that you and I are willing to take, but hopefully there's some that are out there that this is resonating with right now who want to actually get to work. And I do believe that we do have leaders in charge right now within our government that need people like Colonel Mike Brown, and I'll humbly say myself, to help them because they can't do it by themselves. We need those out there that are willing to get down and dirty and to start helping others productively and get to work. I know that we have some great leaders out there in these agencies. And basically what I'm saying is, Colonel Mike, is that let's talk about that action. Let's talk about that action. Let's talk about the action, not only that we're talking about we need from the local communities and the leaders. Let's talk about some of that action that we're willing to do ourselves. And I'll leave it at that, Colonel Mike.
Thanks, Sean. Appreciate the response on that. And before we get into some of the specific goals, we're going to talk about two specifically within this campaign. I want to articulate a little bit further on Sean's notes on local community engagement. Now, folks, we don't need big government. We don't. Not to solve a local community problem. Now, my advice before I get into this, and it's only my auditorial advice, my personal advice, my advice that Sean and I talk about a lot, and solution oriented, is that each local community leader at the mayoral level, at the county level, come together, form your own task force. You don't need a task force at the national level to downward direct this stuff. They don't know what's going on in your community. Only you know what's going on in your community. I would think every county in the United States of America needs to have, outside the VA, by the way, their own clinical, spiritual, medical, mental health treatment center dedicated to veterans that suit the needs of the county and the demand of that county. And you put your proposal together and you run it through your state and you get it funded. And the federal government downward directs resources for all that. That's what we need. We don't need a dusted off campaign plan that's not working. I just want you to leave with that, because you know what? I've served at the local level all my life. Politics is local, and we're not talking politics, but you know, you have to get engaged at the local level and know that these veterans reside in your communities. And we have to stop big government from causing all these large campaigns and all these promises and all these appeasements. They cost money. They have little results. They take away from resources. I just showed you an opinion. They're only going to concentrate in the major states that have a large concentration of veterans. That means the have and have-nots. That means they're not focusing on the total suicide solution of 22 a day, one every 65 minutes. This is a national epidemic. The president, what he needed to do here was to form a board of governors. He needed to do it, mandated it, just like he did with the pandemic, and assign this thing down as a mandate for all states to be a part of, and to have all communities, every county, submit their proposals in an upward direction, facilities to be engaged. That's just my opinion before I even start walking down that. You can form your opinion as you work through that, but I wanted to articulate on the local community action plan that needs to take place. You can't complain all the time. You can't wring your fingers. You can't wring your hands and roll your sleeves up at the same time, right? We have a national epidemic that I think is worse than the pandemic right now in America. These are your fighting men and women. And I'm also going to throw first responders in there too. This is not just happening on the war front. This is happening on the home front. We need solutions, and we have them. We talk about them on this show, and we're getting ready to set up a website now. We're getting a high demand cycle of comments on our show. They like the way we're structuring it. They like the guests that we're having on this show, the feedback that we're getting put in here. And you know why? Because it's from ideas, grassroots solutions that are working. You know, the ambassador and the head for this campaign is the director of Veterans Affairs. I call BS. That should be the vice president of the United States, just like it was for the pandemic. You know, and one of the ambassadors should be the first lady. That's how high of an epidemic this thing is. Let's just call it what it is, cut to the chase, and local communities and leaders at every level. We have 1% serving in our country and 99% don't. You need that 99% of the voice to help that 1% voice. Sean, any more words?
I'll just thank you again, Colonel Mike. I'll just simply say this. I'll speak for you here too, Colonel Mike. We understand that I'll take, for instance, my old agency right now. I know for a fact that there are some tremendous leaders in that agency that are in high positions, and they've earned it. And but I also understand that they're limited, and that in that position that they're in, they need help. So what I'm saying is those leaders out there that are hearing this understand that we're not speaking from a position as if we don't understand the limitations that you guys have in your current positions. What we're saying is, and I'll just say this, I'll start from the bottom. Put Colonel Mike Brown to work. Give him a call. Give us a call. Put us to work, because we're willing to work. And the reason why we're qualified, and I'll humbly say this, is because we suffered from the moral injuries of our careers. PTSD, moral injury, near suicide, near death. We've been, as Colonel Mike says, in the depths of that personal struggle and have come out of it. And in coming out of it, we've grown to learn what it takes to actually defeat suicide, to defeat a slow, perpetual death on earth as a result of these moral injuries. Now, I'll humbly say this. We can't do it alone. We're not the two most, I'll just say this. We don't know everything. We need help, and we're willing to learn, but we're willing to go to work on a spiritual path to help those individuals that are in these positions that want to do something about it that's actually going to make a difference. So basically what I'm saying is, humbly shared, we need those people out there with a spirit to help and to actually solve this problem, that have the influence and the affluence. And there's what I'm going to say. Put us to work. And then what happens is, when you put us to work, we find others, we connect dots that understand where we're coming from, and we start to grow this thing properly. Colonel Mike, take over.
Thank you, Sean. You know, if I had the goal for this as well, for this program, why don't you just call it what it is? The primary goal of this campaign, what it should have been, reduce suicides, period. That's kind of measurable, isn't it? Something we haven't done. President Trump, he should have demanded Department of Veterans Affairs, whoever brought this piece of campaign to you, to measure their performance. So I'm going to get through some specific goals here, America. We've already talked enough about the highlights of the name and the goals and the end state and the means and the who's working on this. So their first goal is to improve suicide prevention research. Now, Sean and I agree with this. It's not improve the research. It's improve the means of the research. Because there's a lot of great research out there going on right now. The problem is access to it is limited. Coordination of it's limited. You know, ideas and who's coordinating is limited to it. It's not focused on the suicide number. If you think the research drives the therapy, you think that's what it would be, right? Research and development is supposed to feed the product line, give the customer what he's looking for. And if we haven't reduced suicides, then of course we want the research to be better. So they want to accelerate the development and implementation of effective solutions to help veteran suicides. Guess when they want to have this thing done by? This is called the national level, by the way. They want to have it done in the next 5 months. Now let's talk about realistic goals. Do you think the federal government has done anything over a 5-month period, but now they're going to set a entire strategy on the last 8 years they haven't been able to do, but they're going to get it done in 5 months? Whose smoke are they blowing up? This is the appeasement we're talking about. Are they not listening to our show or our guests that we've already explained to them this? The medical and spiritual research is already done. The strategies that these two communities, they need to come together. So now they want to have a campaign and a strategy come together, and they're going to have this all set up in the next 6 months? Doubt it. A critical first step towards this goal is to optimize the current research ecosystem. What does that mean? This stuff is so broad and so vague and so wishy-washy, I don't even know what it means. And I have a task force set up about it. Here's how simple this is. Research, research, research. Combine it, get it out, set a performance measure against it, use veterans that are on active duty. We had a guest show on called Operation Resiliency. They've done the research already with high impact active duty folks. We had them on. We showed you America. They did the operational research, and they showed you the kind of therapy they need and the transition that needs to happen. We've shown you where cognitive behavior therapy is not working. We've shown you where adaptive therapy for spirituality is working. Spirituality integrated cognitive behavior therapy is working. You have so much integration of therapy and spirituality and mental research that's gone on already. It's called communication. You don't need a campaign strategy to get people to talk to each other. That's a cultural change. Get it done. That's called talking together. And I'm talking to you, the medical research, and I'm talking to you, spiritual research, the clergy, the medical. This is directed at you, not the administration, not the task force of this campaign. If they're putting this down on paper, then they don't think they have confidence in you for working together. Start working together. Start getting this research out and driving the therapy, because the therapy is not working if our 22 a day is not going down. Find out why and start driving this into our programs and getting down to the local communities. And local communities, start asking for the right therapies. Because when you set up your facilities down there, and Sean and I are going to talk to you about a little bit about that later on. We talked about it last show. You can tailor your therapies to the needs and demands of your local community. Now, we've been on the air for about 40 minutes. I tell you what, I think my campaign's better than this campaign, and Sean's campaign's better than that. What say you, Sean?
To simplify, I know it's been a long show. To simplify, we're talking about life and death of the peacemakers. Okay, it's an epidemic, and we haven't put a dent in it. First responders are walking off the job. Veterans are committing suicide every 65 minutes. Okay, it's simple. We're talking about life and death of the peacemakers, of those that take an oath to so unselfishly put their lives on the line. So what Colonel Mike is saying is it's not an external, internal game, meaning it's not a national level smokescreen. All right, I'll be bold here. I worked inside the government agencies, and I'm very honored. I'm still very honored to be associated with the great men and women that work within these agencies. I know the mistake that we make. We make the mistake of setting goals, just like you heard Colonel Mike explain in the detailed campaign there. We set goals, we get an initiative, and we say we're going to go do this, and we bring attention to it. And what it becomes is, unfortunately, it becomes a smokescreen. It looks good in the media. It looks good when we flap our lips and talk about it. But at the end of the day, there's no real action being done, the next thing you know, it goes, that current initiative disappears within a few months, grants run out, and we give up on it. And then we move on to the next immediate demand or topic being talked about in the media and what we need to do and all this other good stuff. This is what we're talking about here. We're talking about an inside-out game. So that's spiritual. To prevent suicides and to prevent peacemakers and first responders from walking off the job, it's an inside-out game. It's real simple. It's not outside in. It's inside out. We got a problem going on right now, a major problem. Men and women, brave men and women are dying, and we're not doing what needs to be done to help them, which is to start working from the inside out. Inside out. By the way, again, not a prophet, basic human being. I need help every day. I don't have all the answers. I know Colonel Mike will say the same thing. What you hear in our voices today is you hear frustration. We hear frustration because we've had careers within the government agencies and we're honored to have them. And we suffered as a result of being attached to agencies where we put our lives on the line. And we understand moral injury and we understand why men and women are taking their lives. Not just taking their own lives, they're destroying so many lives in the process, and it's costing us money. It's called inefficiency. It's called sustained mediocrity. The way we change all this, and again, we're patient. We understand. We've worked within government. It's an inside-out game. So guess what? You guys don't have to do it all by yourself. All you got to do is hear a little bit of something that's resonating here within Colonel Mike and myself, hopefully, that we got to start on the inside and work outward. That's spirituality. And that's truth. And whether or not our message gets heard today, it doesn't matter to Colonel Mike Brown and I, because you know why? We're just going to keep going. We're going to keep going because the only thing that matters to Colonel Mike and I is whether or not someone's life gets saved every single day. That's the first thing on our mind. How can we be unselfish? How can we be useful? How can we save a life today? How can we inspire someone that's suffering? See, that's the intention. That's what I wanted to say, Colonel Mike. Get it correct on our intention today in this show. Our intention is not to be on a podcast and to move our lips. Our sole intention is the same intention that we had when we did our jobs. And we wanted to do it so well that it broke us. Our intention today is to save lives. And I'll make it simple. Today, my only intention is to make someone's life better. And if I have the chance to save someone's life, I'll speak as a warrior. We're so sincere about this that we're willing to die ourselves in the effort to save a life. That's the truth. We got our lives back through the spiritual path of recovery inside out. And now we're back ready. I'm going to say this and I'll speak for you, Colonel Mike. We live to save others, and we are still willing to die for the right thing and for another righteous human life or for any life. That's what you're hearing in Colonel Mike right now. On top of the fact that he's extremely educated, experienced, qualified, and understands how to operate within government institutions. And we are not so arrogant that we think we're going to go in and change the sustained mediocrity that continuously goes on. We just want to dedicate the rest of our lives to make it a little better. And hopefully that gets contagious and it keeps getting better. And what that means is that lives are going to be changed. And therefore the citizens of this great country and the families and the daughters and everybody that's affected by what a peacemaker goes through is going to have more purpose and meaning and have a better life. And we'll have a better country. Colonel Mike, take it over.
Thanks, Sean. I know we're getting late into the show. We're probably going to have to dedicate another show to the rest of this campaign, which is going to be fine. So their next goal, I'll just get right into it, was building partnership. That sounds good, right? Let's build partnerships. Of course we're going to build partnerships. But do we need the national level to build a partnership? This is what I talked about in the beginning. What President Trump needed to do here was to set up a task force and put his vice president in charge of it and build a board of governors, just like he did during the pandemic. We have enough partnerships on top of this effort. Also, the task force, get this, was going to encourage all 50 states to participate. Imagine that. We're going to encourage them. That's some pretty vague language. Passive language. You don't say something so vague when you mean something so aggressive. The Prevents Task Force has already connected with more than 150 known community boards. You got to be kidding me that the national level is going to work with every community in the United States. That's not how it works. Let the state governors work with their states. National, just sit back and help us legislate and get resources. Okay, we talked enough about first two goals in their bill. I think in this country, each America should have a dedicated treatment center for its vets, that programs are tailored to the vets and the resources are set by the state. States send them to the county and they build these facilities. It is access to health care, mental, that is killing our vets right now, especially those at the local and rural communities. They're not trying to solve the issue. They're trying to appease it. These campaigns do nothing to solve the problem. Why? Because they are so far from the problem itself. I want you to go back to Crisis in America, Veteran Suicide Show number 8, 7, 6. We have them out there right now anyways. And we want you to go back to the Spiritual Warrior program that we talked about. And we talked about how we could tailor a 1 week or up to a 4-week program. You know, at the bottom line, folks, these veterans need a place of safety. Safety at home, safety at the workplace, and safety in a treatment center. They need a place to mourn, and they need a place to reset. Back to their homes, back to their job sites, back to their families. Sean, final words?
Thank you, Colonel Mike. Thank you for saving my life. It's true. I was broken. I was didn't have many people to call, and I called you. You saved my life. And because of that, you've taught me to be available and to stay available and to remain available, because that's really goes back to what I chose to do what I did as a police officer, which was to save lives, because there's no better feeling. There's no better feeling that we get on the inside as when we see someone live, whether it's one of our brothers or whether it's any human soul. So I just want to thank you, because this is dear to me, because we both understand what our brothers and sisters, the peacemakers, go through. And we understand how this world today is a very distracting world with a lot of external distractions. And we've been given a second chance. And all we're saying here humbly today is that, and what you've taught me and what my other coaches have taught me, is just to be available and to be honest and be sincere and to be humble. And again, I want to thank you. I want to thank Deborah. And I want to end on this note that you and I both know that it's all about profound humility before intellect. We still have a lot to learn and we still have a lot to do. But I know that you and I, every day when we wake up, we humble ourselves and we open ourselves up for more growth. And our intention is to be there for our fellow man. That's who Colonel Mike Brown is. And that's who Sean Flynn is. And that's the most sincere truth I can bring you from a state of pure gratitude. Thank you, Colonel Mike.
Thank you, Sean. At the end of the day, what Sean and I do is only by the grace of God. Sean, you're a dear friend. You're a spiritual warrior. And you saved my life too. And folks, we humbly come before you here today to thank you for listening to our show. You know, we spend a lot of time researching. We spend time looking at the facts. And we spend a lot of time searching around rural America and asking questions. And what we hear most often is this: keep fighting the good fight. Crisis in America show is great. It gets down to the grassroots level. It's making changes. And that's because of the grace of God and his gift. Sean and I are just spokespeople, but we've got 50 years of experience that we must share with each and every one of you. And when we see something that's right, we'll say it. But when we see something wrong, as we've seen today, we're going to tell you like it is. Those are called hard truths. You know, the ability to accept reality is vital in maintaining mental and emotional health. This does not imply that reality as it is desirable or good. Rather, change, progress, healing, and the reshaping of reality into something new begins with what is. Radical acceptance. Veterans, after having crossed personal, social, cultural, and sometimes religious or moral boundaries, are left with payment in the baggage of what they've had been done through. Making peace with their actions and their bodies that committed these actions is paramount for survival. And it's a seemingly impossible task. That's why Sean and I so humbly ask, when you put something down on paper, make sure it's actionable, it's realistic, and the veteran and the first responder is the first people you think about when you're putting something down that's going to benefit them, not the institution, but them. I would like to give a shout out to the Wounded Warrior Project, which is a charity and veteran service organization that offers a variety of programs, services, and events for wounded veterans of the military and their families for over 17 years. Their commitment to their welfare has been priority number one. Folks, it's the real deal. It's made a difference in reducing suicide amongst vets. I know in my own personal life, it's made a difference. To contact them, reach out to www.woundedwarriorproject.org. Again, woundedwarriorproject.org. The greatest of a community is most accurately measured by the compassionate actions of its members. Coretta Scott King.
Thank you for listening to Crisis in America, PTSD. All veterans, first responders, or potential guests, we would love to hear from you. Please email your comments to Colonel Mike Brown. That's brown.mike734@gmail.com. Once again, brown.mike734@gmail.com.